welcome to my kitchen today. This is Leah with Family Heritage Living, and today I'm going to make, of all things, biscuits. This is like the 4th biscuit recipe I put on this channel, but I have to tell you what, I have shared biscuit recipes with you that I use regularly because of ingredient situations. I try to use recipes to share with you that are common ingredients in your kitchen that you don't have to have special high dollar recipes with. I felt it only fair that I share with you the holy grail of biscuit recipe that I use. It's an expensive recipe, and it is one that we don't use very often, mainly because of the expense and the richness. If we had a cow instead of goats and I had an abundance of cream and butter, I would probably use this as my regular recipe. It's just that good. But if you're wanting to impress somebody, you're going to a brunch, you're having people over for supper or breakfast or whatever, this is the recipe that I recommend. Okay, so regular recipe on this: 2 cups flour. It usually use a heavier flour for this recipe. I'm going to use white flour all-purpose. A 1/2 cup of butter. Lard is a good substitution. I know lard biscuits are the thing for many, but for this recipe, butter is it. And then you're going to use cream. It can be heavy whipping cream, which is preferred, or it can be a like a 1/2 and 1/2, a thinner cream. But if you want the best results, it should be heavy whipping cream. You're going to use 1 level tablespoon of baking powder. You can make your own, of course, with cream of tartar, cornstarch, and baking soda, or you can buy the pre-made at the store. And also just a pinch of salt. And again, this is for every 2 cups. My recipe here, I've tripled. I'm going to make a fairly big batch of biscuits so the guys can munch on them. So you're going to see me put in 3 sticks of butter, which is going to look like an enormous amount, but it's really not, especially if you're making a single batch and you just use the 1/2 cup. So each stick of butter is equivalent to a 1/2 cup. Now, I normally don't care on many recipes that call for cold butter. On this particular one, I do. I want my butter cold, and I even have my flour cold today. Now for you, those of you that are more refined, you'll have a pastry cutter. For me, I just go in with my hands and dig right in and start, clean hands of course, rubbing that into my flour until it becomes, you'll see it here, I'll spare you the whole rub in, but it will become very little pea-like sizes, even smaller than that. Little pellet salt size. Okay, I will say this: if you have a pastry cutter for cold butter, that is superior to this. Any other time at room temperature, fingers work just as good, if not better. You've got to really make sure you're working this butter into the flour to get the results you want. If are familiar with pie crust, then you'll know the feeling or the purpose in working that cold butter into the flour. Alright, so once you get your butter worked into your flour, you can add your salt and your baking soda. You can do that before if you want. It doesn't really make a difference. Some people like to do all the dry ingredients first. So if I had to give you a measurement, about a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, maybe even down to 1/4 for a single batch, again, of 2 cups flour. Again, I'm making a triple batch, that's why everything looks so much more. As far as your whipping cream, I cannot give you firm amounts on that because it's going to depend on the thickness of your cream. It's going to depend on how soft your butter is when you put it into your flour and how much moisture is in your flour. So I would say, if I had to guess, for 2 cups of flour, probably start with a cup of cream and look at your texture. Maybe just, add a 1/2 cup at a time. Now I may have just added too much cream, which means I'm going to have to put some more flour in here. And I may not have, it just depends. No, that might be okay. You don't want a super doughy dough, but you don't want a super stiff dough either, of course. Now I've used all the white flour I have in here, so I'm going to have to sprinkle a little of my heavier flour on the kneading board to work with that. If you've never worked with biscuit before, biscuit is not like bread dough. You do not want to over knead it. Of course, some kneading does need to be done, but over kneading it makes your biscuits tough. And I don't like a tough biscuit. So all I'm going to do is just work it lightly. I'm not going to work too much of that flour in. I do not want it really any drier than it is now. I just don't want it sticking to my hands. And once I get it together, I'm going to remove some of that flour so I can roll it out. Just want to leave a little bit on here so that it doesn't stick too badly to my board here. All right, I don't want them any thinner than this. Probably about a ½ inch, if I had to guess, just to give you a little bit of a measurement. They're going to raise to about double. My favorite instrument for cutting out a biscuit is a narrow mouth or a regular mouth canning jar lid. It's always perfect in size. Anything else is too big or too small. Now I will let these biscuits rest for a few minutes before I put them in. It's not really a manner of rising like you would a bread dough. But because you've worked the flour and the rising agent, if you give it a minute before you put them in the oven, it will make a fluffier biscuit for you. And if you're impatient, you of course can go ahead and put them in right away. We've been there before. Okay, so out of a triple batch, I have gotten 27 biscuits. So what would you get out of a single batch? 9. Which, if you roll them a little thinner, I guess you could get a dozen out of them, depending on how you're doing this. As you can see, I buttered my pan very heavily on my other biscuit recipes. Sometimes I don't even butter. I put them on so that they're touching each other, just slightly. Not anything major. You don't want to squeeze them in there. As for your oven temperature, you're looking at a fairly hot oven, somewhere between, let's say, depending on how your oven runs and the heat you're using, 350 to 400. So you split it in the middle and say 375. You want them to cook fairly quickly, but not so quickly that the outside is brown and the inside is slightly doughy. So again, it just depends on your oven. All right, so my oven's about 375 right now. I'm going to put them in. I'm going to guesstimate about 20 minutes. We'll come back and check on them. All right, oh my goodness, these are so dangerously good. Check this out. They just pull apart in layers. I'm not kidding you. If you want to impress somebody, this is the biscuit to do. Again, it's not the most economical biscuit. And the other ones for regular type of daily fare, they're just fine. They are affordable, they're economical, they're lower in fat, although you were talking about biscuits, which in themselves really aren't a health food. but these are a great treat, and with honey, butter, just plain butter, jam. Anyways, you can't beat it. If I'm going to have one, I got to get it before my guys come back in because they'll eat them all up. But if you guys try this recipe, please be sure to leave a comment below to let me know how you like it. I just want to pause here for a second and say if you're enjoying this video, please remember to subscribe to our channel, to hit that bell notification, and be sure to share on your social platform. All right, well, that's it for today's video. We hope you enjoyed it. We will talk soon. Until then, God bless.